Many European leaders are considering the prospect of another Trump presidency with a sense of, well, trepidation. They fear what it could mean for US support for Ukraine, for NATO, among other worries. On the other hand, Kamala Harris would mean a very different approach. Here at France 24, Monte Francis with this.
When Donald Trump announced J.D. Vance as his running mate, it reignited fears about what a second Trump term could mean for Europe. Vance has made his isolationist views clear from the start. Just after Russia launched its full-scale invasion in Ukraine, he said on a podcast, quote, "I gotta be honest with you, I don't really care what happens to Ukraine, one way or another." Trump himself has put ongoing funding for Kyiv in doubt and has vowed he would end the war in 24 hours if he wins, without explaining how. He's also said he would not come to the defense of a NATO ally that was under attack by Russia if that member wasn't paying a sufficient amount on its own defense.
No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay.
The U.S. Congress has since passed legislation to limit a president's ability to pull out of NATO. But with the exception of Hungary's Trump-friendly Viktor Orban, EU leaders have spent months increasingly concerned about what a Trump-Vance administration could mean for Europe's overall security.
If 2024 brings us America first again, it will be more than ever Europe on its own.
When it became clear that Trump would be the Republican candidate in 2024, French President Emmanuel Macron argued that Europe should be more assertive on the world stage and not depend on the U.S. for its own long-term security.
Will the U.S. administration remain the same? No one knows, and we cannot delegate our collective security and our stability to the choice of American voters in the years to come.
When NATO members gathered in Washington in July, they made attempts to make the alliance Trump-proof, agreeing to support Ukraine on an irreversible path to NATO membership, along with a long-term pledge of funding to Kyiv from NATO allies. Even with the new Secretary General and Mark Rutte, the pragmatic Prime Minister of the Netherlands, who some have referred to as the Trump whisperer, there are fears that if Trump ends up in the White House a second time, he could still undermine the alliance.
Let's bring in Fraser Jackson, our Washington correspondent, casting his critical eye, as always, on how both US presidential candidates are shaping up, and now zooming in on the US-Europe relationship. Fraser, great to see you, looking nice and sunny where you are. Raining here in Paris, we can't have everything. Trump is for Brussels an ill wind, perhaps, that could blow cold across the continent, protectionist in business, against support for Ukraine. Trump even a fan of Vladimir Putin, who's wanted for war crimes in Ukraine. What would a Trump presidency have in store for Europe, do you think? Give us a sense of that.
I think the worry of that Trump presidency is looming over the United Nations General Assembly. Several foreign diplomats worrying about this, preparing for the future. That is also what I'm hearing in my discussions with these diplomats here in Washington, D.C. They are preparing for, as one person called it, the worst case scenario. And they are concerned that if Trump gets in, those comments that he's made in the past about NATO membership and Ukraine will hold true. He's been speaking about this as recently as Tuesday night, where he said that Vladimir Zelensky is the world's greatest salesman. He said every time he comes to Washington, he walks away with $100 billion. It must be said that the State Department so far says it has given Ukraine $56 billion in total since 2022, and there's no evidence that any more than that has gone out of the U.S. coffers. But I hear this clearly something that Donald Trump is running on, and something that his base are listening to as well. I'm going to read you just a quick takeaway from a poll that came out just a couple of weeks ago, talking about the U.S. support for Ukraine. They polled Republicans and Democrats as to whether they think that the U.S. should stay in the war as long as it takes, or they should leave within an increment of 1 or 2 years, 5 to 10 years. The majority of Republican voters, 53% of them, said that they wanted Ukraine to be funded for up to 1 or 2 years. 37% said that they should stay as long as it takes. That number jumps significantly to 63% when you look at Democrats who say that the US should stay with Ukraine as long as it takes for them to win this war. The other interesting thing, the level of funding. This has been something that the Republicans have touted many times, that Ukraine was getting too much money, and it appears that that is also resonating with their voter base. There was a bit of a split here. 52% of Republicans said that Ukraine is getting too much money from the American government, whereas most Democrats, 39% of those polled, said that it's about the right level. So a significant split there between not only the candidates at the top of the ticket, but also the bases that they represent.
Kamala Harris, of course, has rebooted the Democrat challenge since taking over from Joe Biden. I understand leading in the polls, but you, of course, will correct me on that if I'm wrong, because your knowledge is far greater than mine, and I bow to it. What would it mean if she wins? Would it be basically a continuation of the Biden situation?
It's pretty much business as usual if Kamala Harris does take over the presidency from Joe Biden. That's something that Kamala Harris will be discussing with Volodymyr Zelensky when he comes here to the White House on Thursday. He'll also be meeting with Joe Biden. Notably, there is no meeting with Trump on the cards, although apparently Volodymyr Zelensky did ask for one, but the Trump campaign not giving him one. So something to read into there. But yeah, that definitely will be what the Ukrainians will be hoping for, is that there will be a continuation of a Democratic White House, because that funding that they so desperately need, that victory plan that they want to put to the Democrats, so key to their victory, will continue under Kamala Harris, pretty much, like I said, as with business as usual. So it's going to be something that everybody will be watching closely, and the Ukrainians will be watching closely as they try to get this victory plan in effect before the November election, and then ultimately the January inauguration as well. So something to look out for there.
Fraser Jackson in Washington, thank you very much indeed for that breakdown of what it could mean for the US-Europe relationship. Either way, with a victory for Harris or for Trump, we will continue, of course, to dissect the issues for you between now and November the 5th. That's voting day in the US presidential election. That's it from me for now.